War is peace, said Orwell, but he could easily have added, hate is love. For many people in the UK, the country is not working. The public services, the education system, the housing, the economic system, an increase of impatience and polarisation in discussions, violence, mental illness, and many more things. It started with propaganda, banning people, burning books, stealing businesses, then mass murder. For those they did not expel. Does it sound familiar? We are merely steps away from what the Nazis did to the Jews and others, starting from the 1930s. Our camps are not here, but rather over there. How did our open-minded, welcoming, fair, and friendly country and people get so full of hate? We live in a wokeocracy whose puppet frontmen do not represent the populace. The mainstream media, or MSM, is a propaganda channel spewing hate. Hate the Arabs, hate the Serbs, hate the Libyans, hate the Syrians, hate the Afghans, now hate the Russians. Did any of those countries attack us? Alternative media views from Russia Today, TFI Global or Al Jazeera are banned. Where is the balanced independent journalism? We lock up journalists in Belmarsh prison. This is our legacy. If the MSM is so trustworthy, what happened to exposing the bombing of Nord Stream 2? The truth does not fit with their narrative, since we cannot blame Russians for what we did. Russia was banned from the Auschwitz Memorial in 2023 in Poland. What irony! Who liberated it? Pretty soon kids will think the Americans did, like yet another Hollywood misrepresentation movie. The Holocaust Foundation now includes non-genocides like Bosnia. It was actually a civil war, yet ignores the actual ongoing genocide against Palestinians. The IDF has murdered dozens of civilians, including children, already in 2023. The whole misrepresentation of what is going on in Ukraine is staggering. The Washington-Westminster regime orchestrated a coup d'etat in 2014, and the neo-Nazi Azov Brigade started bombing Donbass and Lugansk civilians with 15,000 casualties. Russia had to defend itself and the ethnic Russian minority. The aim of the Western-backed Ukrainian puppet government is to expel Russian speakers, amongst others. The West is determined to fight to the last Ukrainian. What does that phrase mean? It came from the former US National Security Advisor and anti-Russian hate preacher Zbigniew Brzezinski. Funding and arming the Mujahideen to ensnare the Soviets, to degrade them financially, morally, and militarily. And now look at the state of Afghanistan. Ukraine will be a seismic front for decades to come, a monumental seismic front. Where is the debate? Does it not bother the vast number of Brits who cannot use critical thinking? Remember the lack of WMDs in Iraq? Who made up the lies like Putin wants to attack the Baltics or Poland or rebuild the USSR, or he has cancer, or look at the vile Time magazine depictions of him, for example, as a vampire. It is now clear that since the Minsk Accords, NATO has been arming and training Ukraine for a proxy war against Russia, buying time since the 2014 coup. Russia's demands were clear and simple: to halt this special military operation, or SMO, ensure Ukraine neutrality, recognize Crimea as Russian, and additionally the breakaway republics of Lugansk and Donetsk. The BBC laughably pushes for a war crimes tribunal against Russia, again propagandizing us to believe that Russian forces are targeting civilians, when most civilian attacks are perpetrated by Ukrainian forces. Actually, Russian forces have been very restrained, according to military experts like Scott Ritter and Douglas McGregor. referring to the NATO-funded illegal ICTY, or International Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia, as justification and an example of success is again ludicrous. During this illegal process, it became clear that defending your own people from NATO aggression and terrorism constitutes a war crime. An illegal tribunal against Russia will serve no purpose and will be a mockery of international justice, since Russia has a right to defend itself under international law. And where is the tribunal for 1.2 million civilian casualties in the illegal wars in Iraq and Afghanistan? War criminals Blair, Bush, and Clinton still roam freely. Even more worrying is how docile Finland and Sweden want to join NATO, lauded for being egalitarian and neutral, without even a referendum or a public debate. When global NATO or G-NATO attacks China or Iran, both Sweden will have to send their soldiers to terrible deaths while paying at least 2% of GDP, which the overtaxed people can ill afford. The Tories have sent at least £5 billion in weapons to Ukraine, while we cannot afford pay rises or better public services. Overall, $200 billion in aid. Wow. That could have helped Ukrainian people getting out of poverty, or built factories, paid for infrastructure, or long-term economic investment. It is clearly a proxy war, and even the useless, lamentable and tactless German Foreign Minister Baerbock said publicly, Europe is at war with Russia. A German declaring war on Russia again? German tanks will be rolling into Russia again. This is what happens when there are gender-based quotas for government positions. Remember how bad Ursula von der Leyen was as her predecessor? Again, using high-level contacts to get the job with no political ability whatsoever. Germany needs to remember it has only one strike out of 3 left. Russia is fighting an existential threat from an evil organization called G-NATO, whose international corporatist sponsors want to devour its limitless natural resources. Recall President Eisenhower warned us of the military-industrial complex, or MIC. Then it will move to Iran, China, and African countries who own cobalt or other highly sought-after resources. Cobalt security, lithium security. These expressions will occur, made public by a lying press. I support Russia, and many do, and remember its hard-fought victory in World War II with 27 million victims, which the West wants to cancel. The Germans and their fascist allies lost 80% of their soldiers on the Eastern Front. When the USSR fell in 1991, NATO promised not 1 inch forward. They lied. What the UK and US are doing constitutes an existential threat to Russia. We need Russia on our side, a technologically advanced Christian European partner for peace, not an angry nuclear adversary. Which country will benefit from a conflagration in Europe? The same one which started the Turkish missile crisis in 1962 and murdered 7 million civilians since 1950. United States of America, of course, with the UK as a raging voluntary cheerleader. We should move away from the central bank money printing fake economy based on the defunct fiat dollar and embrace the real new world order, the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. 4 billion people emerging from colonialism, building their own infrastructure technology based on huge resources and people power. Even staunch US ally Saudi Arabia has had enough and will join. So will NATO member Turkey and the much sanctionized Iran. As Jeffrey Sachs said, Ukraine will be the latest neocon disaster. I declare it will be the last. Russia and Iran already stopped G-NATO in Syria. So how did we become fascist in the UK? Ask Abramovich, as both a Russian and a Jew. Look at the last 30 years since Gulf War. Therein lies your answer.